He was named after his paternal grandfather, Robert Tyre Jones Jr. He preferred to be called Bob, but to adoring fans everywhere, he was known as Bobby. Bobby Jones was an ultra-athlete, the Prince of Golf, who ruled the golf world in the roaring 20s when amateur golf was revered and hickory shafts and the stymies still saw play. He had already taken the game to unprecedented heights, winning 9 major championships in a 6-year period. But as a new decade began, he had a far grander ambition in mind. Could he achieve one of the greatest feats in sports history, one that could probably never be duplicated? It was called the Grand Slam. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday, May 26, 1930, Bob Jones stood on the first tee at the old course at St. Andrews. He wasn't feeling well. His stomach was on the verge of active nausea, signs of the ever-increasing mental stress. Jones was about to play his first match in the first major of the year, the British Amateur Championship. It was the only major he had never won. It was the beginning of his quest to win all 4 majors in a single year.
Bob Jones first conceived of the Grand Slam in 1926. He thought that it was possible to win all 4 major championships all in the same year.
He wanted to quit golf, playing in front of people. And he didn't just want to walk away from the game. He wanted to find an exit strategy that would allow him to go out of the game on his own terms.
And the Grand Slam was it, a chance to walk away with nothing to prove.
He had never intended golf to be a vocation. He intended it always to be an avocation. And I think he wanted to get back to playing casual rounds of golf with his friends.
He played golf like a man possessed. He was very calm on the course, particularly late in his career. You never saw him look like he was grinding. Inside, the gears were burning up. The friction was consuming him from the inside out. He would typically lose 12 to 15 pounds during an Open over 4 days.
The Walker Cup was very key to Jones getting over to Britain. He didn't come from a wealthy family, and when it was a Walker Cup year, the USGA actually paid for the trip. Travel in those days was extremely difficult, very expensive, took a long time.
Therefore, his goal to win the Open and amateur championships in Britain and the United States began in 1930 when the Walker Cup went abroad. To take the British Amateur, Jones would have to win 7 18-hole elimination matches before the 36-hole final.
The British Amateur is one of the most difficult championships to win because the first rounds are only 18 holes, and any Tom, Dick, or Harry with a hot putter can put you out. And that's exactly what used to happen.
In 1929, my grandfather went out to play in the National Amateur, which was being played at Pebble Beach. And the general thought at the time was that he was going to just go through that field like a hot knife through butter. Instead, though, the golf world was shocked when he was eliminated in the very first round.
Still, in the 1930 British Amateur, nobody thought that his first-round opponent, Sid Roper, the ex-coal miner from Nottingham, would pose any threat. Jones had his doubts.
I could make a pretty fair appraisal of the worth of an opponent simply by speaking to him on the first tee and taking a good measuring look into his eyes. I thought I could tell whether or not he would be likely to play his best game under pressure. What I observed of Mr. Roper in this respect was not at all reassuring. He had the look not only of a golfer, but of a competitor as well.
Sensing danger, Jones made birdies on both 1 and 3 to open up a 2-shot lead. Then on 4, after putting his drive into the dreaded cottage bunker, he played one of the best shots of his life. 150 yards out, Bob struck the ball with a spade mashie, and it
descended lightly just beyond the little rise at the front of the green. The spin took hold promptly, and instead of bounding, the ball rolled and seemed to slide over the glassy surface, slower and slower, and at last trickled into the hole without touching the flagstick.
The rare albatross increased his lead to 3. Despite Roper playing far better than expected, Bob closed him out on 16, 3-2.
On the basis of comparative scores, I think he would have won from any other player in the field in that round. And there you have one of the major uncertainties of the golf tournament. In order to win, you must play your best golf when you need it most.
It was apropos that St. Andrews was the opening site in Jones' great feat. The course had taught him many lessons in championship behavior and turned him from teen prodigy to loved champion.
Few people realize that Bob Jones' career only spanned 14 years. He had 7 lean years in which he never won a major championship, and then he had 7 years in which he won 13 major championships. And of course, everyone wants to know, well, what made the difference? And the answer is that in his youth, Bob Jones had the face of an angel, but the temper of a timber wolf.
He was a rather fractious teenager, and they had to call Bobby down for his language because it was rather rude to the young ladies they were playing with.
Bob Jones felt that some emotions couldn't be endured with a golf club in his hands, and so he decorated the golf trees adjacent to the green every time he hit a bad shot.
The turning point came at the 1921 Open Championship at St. Andrews, in a moment Jones would later say was the most inglorious failure of my golf life.
He made 4 or 5 bad shots in a row and was so disgusted, he actually tore up his scorecard.
Tore it into shreds, threw it in the Eden River. He then asked his caddy for his driver. He drove off number 12, and he played the rest of the round, but he had quit.
And this brought down the wrath of God.
The British press said, Master Bobby Jones is a boy, and a rather ordinary boy after all.
And Bob realized that, holy cow, I'm not mature enough yet to handle this pressure and to play under these circumstances. And it caused him to really reassess his character, his approach to the game, and St. Andrews itself.
Tommy Armour then persuaded Jones that St. Andrews was born of strategy. The more that you study her, the more you understand her. The more you understand her, the more you want to study her.
In my humble opinion, St. Andrews is the most fascinating golf course I have ever played. If I had to select one course upon which to play the match of my life, I should have selected the old course.
When he came to grips with his own emotions and he learned how to harness those and to channel those in a productive way, and when he came to realize that he could not beat everybody on the golf course, but he could beat old man par, then he made that transition from just being a very, very fine golfer to being an incredibly great golfer.
Ironically, the site of his greatest embarrassment would turn out to be his place of destiny.
He was not going to simply allow his first inglorious failure to rule his life. In 1927, Jones came back to St. Andrews and he won the Open.
There's a great redemption story in the way that he had come back kind of humbly, asked the people of St. Andrews to forgive his youthful lapse 6 years earlier, and then won the tournament.
The 2 most famous photos in golf, in my estimation, are the famous one-iron shot of Hogan to the 72nd hole at Marion in 1950, and the other one is of Jones being lifted onto the shoulders of the crowd. That's a very moving photo.
I had rather win a championship at St. Andrews than anything else that could happen to me. You've done so many things for me that I'm embarrassed to ask for one more, but I will. I want this wonderful old club to accept the custody of the cup for the coming year.
Everyone decided that Bobby Jones was really one of their own. They called him our Bobby.
His greatness was so manifest that day.
In the 1930 British Amateur, Jones would find victory in his first 3 matches, but in the 4th round, he would meet a man who would come within a heartbeat of ending his Grand Slam dream. Later in his life, Jones would call the 1930 British Amateur Championship the most important tournament in his life. Probably the most anticipated and hard-fought match of that tournament came in the fourth round when Jones met the defending champion, Cyril Tolley.
Cyril stood about 6'2" and weighed 220. Was a huge character and was the most prodigious driver of the golf ball in Great Britain. Tolley could hit it further than anybody.
He was an Oxford graduate. He was a British amateur who had survived as a German POW during World War I. This guy was tough, and he was big, and he was fearless, and he had the crowd behind him.
According to the Times of London writer Bernard Darwin,
every man, woman and child in St Andrews went out to watch it, and Mr. Gerard Fairley was quite right to set the scene of the murder in one of his stories on the afternoon of that match. There would have been ample opportunity to commit several murders and escape undetected through the lonely streets.
Bob Jones.
Tolley was a big, powerful player with an exquisite touch in the short game, and in my opinion, the most dangerous man I could possibly meet in an 18-hole match at St. Andrews. He was one of those players who had a flair for the spectacular, although he did it in a different way. He played the game like Hagen in the grand manner.
About 12,000 people followed the match. 20-minute delays were frequent as overmatched stewards tried to bring order. Bernard Darwin described it as great unthinking waves of people.
This was like a heavyweight prize fight. These two went at each other back and forth all day long. No quarter given or asked.
Nor have I any real recollection of how good the golf was, that is, in total. But I have graven on my soul, I think, the completely brutal ferocity of that man-to-man contest.
And they came to the 17th hole dead even, the famous road hole, and took very different approaches. Bob pulled his drive down the left-hand side. Some people think on purpose. Tolley hit his drive over the corner of the railroad sheds like you're supposed to, up the right-hand side.
As Jones prepared for his approach, the enormous crowd pinched the green.
I made completely audible request to the stewards to move the crowd back on the left side and even mounted a high piece of ground to motion them back myself. I played only after several minutes and after it had become apparent that the crowd could be moved no farther.
Jones aimed toward the left-hand edge of the green to take the road bunker out of play. And he hit it a little too strong and the ball ricocheted against the crowd.
The ball hit a spectator, dropped and landed on the fringe of the green and probably saved him a 6 or higher.
Many people said that it would have ended up on the road or up against the wall behind. It would have been dead.
Controversy surrounded the shot. Did Jones unfairly use the crowd as a backstop?
This was very definitely not the case. I should never have been so heedless of the possibility of inflicting injury upon a spectator.
Tolley hit it to the left of the road bunker and had the most difficult shot on the old course. A very delicate shot over the road bunker. Stop it on a marble top fast green with the road beyond as your penalty if you hit it too strong. Tolley hit the most exquisite pitch you've ever seen.
It has never been surpassed for exquisitely beautiful execution. I shall carry to my grave the impression of the lovely little stroke with which he dropped the ball so softly in exactly the right spot, so that in the only possible way it finished dead to the hole.
Jones, who had chipped to 8 feet, now needed to make the putt to keep it all square.
If I had not holed this one, I would not be writing this story. Although it had been as tense a hole as I had ever played in my life, the result only served to increase the pressure.
On 18, both players had birdie putts. Jones went first and missed. Tolley now had a 15-footer. to end Jones's dream.
And then I went through, I think, the most agonizing moments of that entire year. I fully expected him to hold this one, and there was nothing I could do about it. But he missed to relieve my agony, and we headed for the 19th.
The enormous crowd raced to find positions on the first hole. Unlike the two previous holes, Jones took the advantage in sudden death, putting his approach to 10 feet. Tolley missed the green left and then chipped to 7 feet. Even though Jones missed his birdie putt by inches, it stymied his opponent. Marking your ball was not allowed in those days. Tolley tried to slice his putt around, but was unsuccessful. The great battle was over.
I have always regretted that such a splendid, exciting match should have been decided by a stymie. It was the kind of match which each player plays himself so completely out that at the end, the only feeling to which he is sensitive is one of utter exhaustion.
It was the devil of a match.
In 1930, in order to prepare himself for the Grand Slam, Bob Jones added 2 professional golf tournaments to warm up, one in Savannah, one in Augusta. And when he was playing the tournament in Augusta, he was 13 shots ahead of the lead.
To compete against the world's best, only play the few tournaments that he played and win them all. And to create a combination of tournaments that are, at that time, were probably the 4 major championships in the world, you know, that's pretty special.
There was a little Scottish pro named Bobby Cruikshank who became a lifelong friend and fan. And Cruikshank intuited that Bobby was training to go assault this Mount Everest of records, to try to win the 4 championships in 1 year.
And he acted on that hunch. He placed a 50-to-1 bet with the bookies in Great Britain, and when it cashed in, it was $60,000.
Now, bear in mind, this is now the summer of 1930. The stock market had just crashed horribly, just maybe, 8 months before? We look at it in retrospect and say, wow, that was a crazy thing to do. But if you'd just lost several $100,000 on companies that were too big to fail, maybe Bobby Jones wasn't as bad an investment as you might have thought.
At that same tournament that aroused Cruikshank's betting mind, Jones also went to visit a large piece of property for sale adjacent to the tournament site. In the coming years, it would become the Augusta National Golf Club, home of the Masters. Two people who almost certainly knew of Jones's plan accompanied him abroad. His wife Mary, who knew firsthand of her husband's physical and emotional stresses, and O.B. Keeler.
O.B. Keeler was a marvelous man. He was the newspaper reporter for the Atlanta newspaper, and he went to every one of Jones's major tournaments.
Saw every one of his 13 major championships, so Keeler was with him as his father confessor and, I say, sports psychologist.
On April 30th, Jones boarded the Mauretania for transport to Britain. As captain of the Walker Cup, his team accompanied him.
A bunch of celebrities were going over with him as well. Bobby knew some of these guys, like Douglas Fairbanks, the great movie star of that day.
I know it is the sentiment of everybody in the audience to wish Mr. Jones and his team a great deal of luck in England this spring.
He and Fairbanks were very close. He was there. Maurice Chevalier, the old French movie star, was on that boat.
Out on the deck, Jones kept in shape, playing a variation of tennis that had been taught to him by Mr. Fairbanks. The game was appropriately called Doug. When the Mauretania docked in Southampton on May the 6th, the first order of business was the Walker Cup, the Ryder Cup for amateurs.
This was a very important part of golf to him, particularly as a dedicated amateur. He thought this was one of golf's greatest events. He'd been on the team a number of times, and he knew the squad that they'd assembled for 1930 was really strong. And the American team won 10-2 and showed that Bobby was in great form as he was starting to climb this mountain.
A week later, Walker Cup teammates would become rivals as Jones sought the 1930 British Amateur Championship. Following his close match with Cyril Tolley, Jones had to sink a 9-foot par putt on the home hole to secure a 1-up lead over Jimmy Johnston. And in the semifinals against George Voigt, Bob sank a 12-footer on the 17th to remain even. He won it on 18 when Vogt bogeyed. Jones continued to find a way to win. O.B. Keeler.
Golf tournaments are matters of destiny, and that the result is all in the book before a shot is hit. Looking back over Bobby's 8 matches, you may see crisis after crisis in those furious encounters with Tolley, Johnston, and Voigt, where the least slip of nerve or skill or plain fortune would have brought defeat to Bobby's dearest ambition. Yet at every crisis, he stood up to the shot with something I can only define as inevitability, and performed what was needed with all the certainty of a natural phenomenon.
Bob Jones was really glad to finally get to the 36-hole final. He had made his way through all of these 18-hole matches. Now he's in his element. Just play old man par and just relentlessly play his game. He played against Roger Weathered. The interesting thing was, as Jones was the captain of the American Walker Cup team in 1930, Weathered was the captain, fittingly, of the British team.
In the 36-hole final, Weathered could offer no resistance to fate. Jones would secure a 7-6 victory. The British amateur was his.
He was exhausted, he was elated, and he felt that he had dodged the biggest bullet that lay in his way toward this possible goal of the impossible Grand Slam. The British amateur was behind him.
There's been nothing in golf I wanted so much. I can't believe it really happened.
Bob had not confided in anybody yet beyond O.B. Keeler and Mary that the Grand Slam was the ultimate goal.
I've won the British Amateur at last. My little expedition is a success, no matter what happens at Hoylake.
There was a little bit of speculation in columnists like Grantland Rice saying this could be the start of something big, but Bob was far too humble to suggest publicly that this was his goal. His wife and O.B. Keeler, who were now exerting almost an equal amount of control and influence in his life, had suggested maybe a week in Paris between the amateur and the open to refresh yourself would be just the tonic before we have to go back into the grind of another tournament.
9 months after their visit to Paris in 1930, my Aunt Mary Ellen was born.
It was like a second honeymoon for him and my grandmother.
He said when he came back for the Open that he felt very refreshed. He also hadn't practiced or hit many golf balls, so when he got to Hoylake and went out to the range, he reported with some alarm to O.B. Keeler that he had no idea where the ball was going. And that was how he began the second leg of the Grand Slam, feeling his swing was completely at sea.
Bob took extra time on the driving range at Hoylake, trying to get some comfort back with his driver, Jeannie Deans. 2 rounds of qualifying were required for all players. Bob shot 73-77, which brought doubts about his Open chances. London golf writer Bob Howard.
Bobby Jones took a turn among the ordinary mortals by compiling a score of 77. It was plenty good enough for qualifying purposes, but although he said he was very dissatisfied with his golf, I am quite sure he could have done considerably better if the need had existed.
The Open began on Wednesday, June 18th.
I simply don't know where the ball is going to go when I hit it.
It was torturous play for Jones. A good short game and help from Calamity Jane kept him in it. Bernard Darwin.
One hole in par followed another in monotonous perfection.
Despite it all, Jones held the lead after 2 rounds.
The final day was played on Friday, and it was a double round.
There was a kind of blustery, big-chested, burly pro from England named Archie Compston, who had that morning issued a challenge to all his fellow Brits in the clubhouse. Are we just going to let this guy walk away with our championship? He was given to pronouncements like this. But Archie Compston went out and shot a 68 in the 3rd round and set a new course record
When Bob Jones went out for his 4th round, Archie Compton was coming in, finishing his 3rd round, and Compton had lit up the scoreboard, and now he had the lead.
He started to grind out his final round. He built up a big lead, gave some of it back.
The pressure that he put on himself was agonizing.
Bob finished, thought he had the tournament in the bag, but he made a couple of mistakes coming in and felt, man, there's a chance I might have given this thing away.
Bob went up in the top of the clubhouse and had fermented beverage, and you could hear the 2 ice cubes that they had in Great Britain shaking up against that glass. He was trembling so much.
And then out of nowhere, Compton blew up in the 4th round, never came back to challenge after his startling 68. And suddenly, the British Open Championship was his. The guy looks like he's about to collapse. He's been in this pressure cooker twice now within 3 weeks, has clearly taken a physical toll on a guy who's only 28 years old.
Writer Herbert Warren Wind.
At Hoylake, Bobby had won through patience, guts, philosophy, and instinct.
Bernard Darwin.
Bobby Jones has no more records to equal or worlds to conquer. It was a triumph of courage.
A week after his Open victory, Bob, Mary, and O.B. Keeler boarded the Europa for the 3-day sail to New York. Keeler's Associated Press articles and radio broadcasts had made all those in the States fully aware of Jones's great feat. Jones's mother and father were among many hometown Atlantans who railed up to New York to meet the Europa.
They were in a boat called the Mandalay, and they had a full orchestra on the boat.
When he arrived in New York, the world welcomed him with open arms. There's only been 2 men who have had 2 ticker tape parades in New York City. Bob Jones was the first. John Glenn, years later, was the second.
O.B. Keeler.
Sometimes he tells me it's the regret of his life that he has to be famous just for his proficiency at a sport. He could enjoy all of this if they were following him because of some great achievement in some thoughtful line of work, such as writing or healing.
But in the summer just following the stock market crash, people needed heroes.
That's why it's hard today to fully appreciate how well Bob Jones was regarded. I guess if you looked at the fame that Tiger had amassed and you added the charisma and the personality of Michael Jordan and just the sheer popularity of Arnold Palmer, and you put that all together, you might have an understanding of what Bob Jones meant to people as the Depression was starting in America, and this paragon of American goodness and athletic talent and gentlemanly behavior suddenly rose in everybody's imagination. New York was a whirlwind.
But it was not foreseen nor expected that your coming would bring 2 other poles together, namely the world's greatest golfer to be welcomed by the world's worst golfer.
Jones's reassault on the Grand Slam would begin again in a week.
In 1930, after Bob had won both the British Open and the British Amateur, the secret was out. When he came back to America, everyone knew that his ambition was to win all 4 titles in 1 year.
His next test, the U.S. Open Championship at Interlaken.
Minneapolis had a great golf culture that had grown up in the last 20 years. Again, largely as a result of the Francis Ouimet victory in 1913. Interlaken Country Club had become the centerpiece of that golf culture in Minneapolis. This was its first time hosting a U.S. Open, and it was a terrific course.
Bob felt right at home at Interlaken. The massive Tudor clubhouse and course were similar to East Lake, his home course in Atlanta. East Lake was where it all began.
He never really took a formal lesson in his life. He learned the swing by following Stuart Maiden, who was the pro here at East Lake, And Stewart had a very, very smooth Carnoustie-style swing, which was very upright, very rhythmical, and my grandfather would just copy that. With children, mimicry comes very, very easily, and my grandfather was particularly good at it. He learned the game by imitating Stuart Maiden.
Had great rhythm, great balance, and for his day, he hit the ball extremely long. Although he would say that many times in match play, he would tee off with a 3-wood, let his opponents outdrive him, and then put the second shot close to the hole to put pressure on his opponent. I never was good enough to do that.
Ordinarily, I like to spend the day before a tournament in bed, reading a book, or just doing anything not connected with golf. This time the heat was so great that a hotel room held little attraction.
There was no air conditioning.
As he arrived, so did this monumental midsummer Midwestern heat wave with the kind of humidity that, if you've never experienced it, can be absolutely overwhelming. The temperatures on the first day of the Open reached 108 degrees. Now that's with about 98% humidity. That can kill a lot of people, and it did in Minneapolis.
It was so bad that Cyril Tolley, Jones's good friend and the great player from amateur from the UK, actually passed out.
I started the round clad in light gray +4s, a shirt with a collar, and red 4-in-hand tie. I carried a dozen or so redwood tees in my trousers pocket. When I finished the round, my +4s were so saturated that they appeared to be black. The tie had red all over my shirt, and the red from the tees had stained the leg of my trousers. Neither Keeler nor I could loosen my tie, so he cut it off with a pocket knife.
Despite the heat, Jones opened with a respectable 71. Walter Hagen.
Here is the greatest field ever assembled on any golf course. Here you have the survivors of 1,200 entries, and yet it is one field against one man, Bobby Jones.
The field for the U.S. Open in 1930 was probably the strongest field that Jones faced all year. You had people like Sarazen and Farrell and Hagen, both McDonald Smith and Horton Smith. They didn't want to see this amateur continue this. They wanted to beat this guy.
Often, there are turning points at a tournament that can make or break a player. Jones went through one of them in the second round. It was a shot later called the lily pad shot.
Jones weathered through this terrible heat wave and hit some of the most unusual shots in his career. He came to the 9th hole, which is a par 5 over a water hazard, and he hit his second shot a little too thin.
He was in the middle of his backswing. He saw, it looked like 2 young girls make a move to run across the fairway, and he flinched, and he topped the ball, and it skipped across the pond, ending up on the other side.
He was able to get it up and down for a birdie. 15,000 people swore it hit 2 lily pads and skipped over because Bob Jones was so lucky. So that was known as the lily pad shot.
Fate has to be your playing partner on more than one occasion if you're going to achieve something quite like the Grand Slam of golf.
He ended up shooting a 73 that day and came in feeling like he was awfully lucky to be where he was. And it set up an extraordinary final day at the U.S. Open.
It was Saturday, July 12th. 36 holes would be played to find the 1930 U.S. Open champion. Jones knew they would be his last.
I began the morning swinging smoothly and comfortably in the way I like to start a championship round. This was the one time that I played at my very best in a championship.
In the morning round, Jones carded an incredible 68 and opened up a 5-stroke lead.
People who had more or less started packing it in, they thought, oh, it's over, Bob's got it, it's all his, until he came to the 17th hole.
He hit his ball over to the right-hand side. Prescott Bush, father of George H.W. Bush, our 41st president, made a ruling that the ball had hit a tree and gone into a water hazard, allowing Bob to drop nearer the green than going back to the tee and having to re-tee.
He was supervising the match, and he announced that the rules committee earlier that week had decided that the 17th hole was going to be a lateral hazard.
Gene Sarazen was reported as saying that Bob ought to give up that tournament title because that was an incorrect ruling at 17. Prescott Bush made that ruling, and that is that.
Regardless, Jones still made a double bogey. Max Smith, who had trailed Jones by 7 at the start of the final round, was within 1. After a perfect drive on the par 4 18th, Jones left his approach 40 feet short of the pin.
As I stepped up to the putt, I was quivering in every muscle. I confess that my most optimistic expectation was to get the thing dead. It's impossible to describe the sensation I felt when I saw the ball take a small break 5 or 6 feet from the cup. I knew it was in.
If people hadn't been so exhausted from the heat, they probably would have carried him off, just as they had done everywhere else that year.
Max Smith, down by 2, would never get closer. The U.S. Open victor was Bob Jones.
And I am now going to ask Mr. Robert T. Jones to come and accept this cup, representative of the Open Championship of the United States of America.
The victory at Interlaken was extremely important. Everybody had Bob Jones in his sights, and he knew that, and they knew that, and so he had to perform, and that's what he did.
I consider myself exceedingly lucky to have won this championship, and the second one is that I want to thank you all for the very considerate way in which you've all behaved this week.
From heat, nerves, and fatigue, Jones had lost 17 pounds this week. He needed a break. Fortunately, the U.S. Amateur was over a month away. It was time to go home. As Bob enjoyed his hometown reception, he was lucky to be there. On the trip down from Interlaken, a mail plane noticed a fire on a trestle crossing the Mississippi and was able to signal the engineer on Bob's train. It was one of several events that happened in the following month.
Again, destiny played a hand. Lightning can strike.
That happened.
Trains can run off the track. Cars can almost hit you on Peachtree Street.
That happened.
You can almost grab a razor blade in midair and then realize what you're doing.
That also happened.
But if destiny is on your side, it tends to work out.
Being at home also reminded Jones about what was most important to him.
There were other things that were important in his life. Golf certainly was important to him, but more important to him was his family and his law practice.
Bob Jones was raised in a proper Southern family with Victorian values, and people from the Jones family did not play golf for money. It was that simple. It was a game of recreation, not for cash. So now, the final leg of the Grand Slam, the U.S. Amateur Championship, being held at Marion outside Philadelphia. Bob had begun his career at Marion.
Bob Jones had a special place in his heart for the Marion Cricket Club. He was the youngest competitor ever in the U.S. Amateur Championship in 1916. He was 14 years old. He added his first amateur out of 5 at Marion in 1924.
It was a fitting sight for the end of his competitive career. Could he win the Grand Slam?
Of all 4 of the victories in the Grand Slam, the U.S. Amateur was the one that he coveted the most. Obviously, it would finish off the journey. It would complete this epic undertaking that he'd begun at the Amateur in Britain. But it would also close out his career at the place where he felt it had begun. He would close the circle. This was the alpha and the omega of his life, coming together with the kind of symmetry that only legends seem to be able to manufacture.
Imagine there were 18,000 people crowded on the Marion Cricket Club golf course at the time Bob Jones was vying for the final leg of the Grand Slam. Everybody wanted to see Bob Jones win the Grand Slam and tell their grandkids about it. Remember, this was a time when we didn't have gallery ropes, so the gallery was walking right next to the players. So in order to create some order on the golf course, the powers that be brought in 50 uniformed Marines to shepherd Bob through the golf holes.
I do not have anything against the human race as a tribe, but I prefer them in small doses.
Gene Sarazen.
Jones was always polite toward his idolatrous galleries, but I think he regarded them as an element that could deter his concentration if he let it invade his thoughts. This arduous dedication to the job at hand left him spent and weary after each round.
To Bob Jones, and he wrote this, that the U.S. Amateur was the easier field for him. And it was for a couple of reasons. The first 2 rounds were played at 18 holes, which he didn't like, but then you quickly got into the 36-hole matches. It wasn't just reserved for the final. Also, the U.S. Amateur field was seeded.
Bob was somewhat fortunate in that 5 of the major past champions had been put out of the tournament. Ouimet was put out, Harrison Jimmy Johnson was put out, Voigt was put out.
He seemed to have an aura about him that week. There seemed to be an air of inevitability about him. And no one really stepped out of the field to challenge him in a way that he'd been pushed in any of the other 3 tournaments.
Finally, on Saturday afternoon, September 27th, Jones met Gene Homans in the final. The outcome was never in doubt. On the 11th hole, Homans stroked a putt toward the hole, and before it came to rest, walked to Bob to concede defeat. Shouts and cries filled the air. The impregnable quadrilateral had been conquered.
All at once, I felt the wonderful feeling of release from tension that I had wanted so badly for so long a time. I wasn't quite certain what had happened or what I had done. I only knew that I had completed a period of the most strenuous effort, and at this point, nothing more remained to be done.
It's really a great treat to play before a gallery that understands golf and appreciates the difficulties under which the players labor. Thank you very much.
When you consider that Bob Jones won 23 out of 52 tournaments that he played in. From 1923 to 1930, he won 13 out of 21 major championships, 62%. To give you an idea, Hogan won 37%. Nicklaus won 18% of the major championships he played in.
The Grand Slam was, to me, the greatest feat ever in American golf, and maybe in American sports.
Bob retired from competitive golf in the fall of 1930. The inner friction, turmoil, and commitment it commanded fell to the wayside. Still, he continued to have a profound effect on the evolution of the game. He inspired new people to take up the game, and that plot of land he discovered in the spring of 1930 would develop into Augusta National Golf Club, home of the Masters.
In this man, all the values of sport, all the things that make sports truly what it is, that make it a triumph of human achievement, the sportsmanship of sports, all of that was encapsulated in a young man from Atlanta, Georgia.
To remember him as a man, we have to picture someone who embodied the best of what an American was supposed to be in that period. Somebody who lived right, who told the truth. He lived by example. He treated everyone well. And if you were to say to somebody today, pick an athlete from the 20th century who is most like the man you'd like your son to grow up to be, I think without hesitation, I'd pick Bobby Jones.